Hello, class, and welcome back. This is chapter 4. So, today we're going to be talking about cross cultural interactions. Our big questions are: is the world really getting smaller? Are there winners and losers within globalization? Doesn't everyone want to be developed? If the world is not becoming homogenized, what is it becoming? What are the strategies anthropologists can use to study global interactions or interconnections? So let's start talking about, is the world getting smaller? Globalization is the widening scale of cross-cultural interactions caused by rapid movement of money, people, goods, images, and ideas within nations and across national borders. Social, economic, and political interconnection. There are three different ways of really looking at this. The first is the diffusionalists. These people believe that, or believed at least, that cultural characteristics result from internal historical dynamism or the spread, i.e., diffusion, of cultural attributes from other societies. Marxist anthropologists, on the other hand, say that non-Western societies could not be understood without reference to their place within the global capitalistic system. As globalization has increased pace, anthropologists realize that too narrow a focus gives an incomplete understanding of people's lives and the underlying causes of cultural differences. So, what is this saying? Uh, this is looking at the difference in the ways that these interconnections are happening, and anthropologists today, at least, have realized that both of these two theories really aren't quite up to snuff as far as looking at the holistic picture. So, transnationalization. Interconnections should not imply that everyone is an equal participant in the process of globalization. Unfortunately, the word globalization, with its emphasis on globe, exaggerates the span of financial and social interconnections. You can definitely look around the world and see that there are those that are heavily profiting from globalization and those that are being taken advantage of. We used to call them third world versus first world problems. It's industrialized versus non-industrialized anymore. So some anthropologists prefer transnational. This refers to the relationship that extends beyond nation-state boundaries without assuming they cover the whole world. So I think that's a better definition to look at as well when looking at these interconnections. So, global communications. Technology allows rapid and frequent communication across the world. Only 1 in 5,000 people in sub-Saharan Africa, of course excluding South Africa, has computer access. A lot of them, however, do have access to cellular devices, and those tend to be used more often than actual computers in sub-Saharan Africa. Wealth and poverty play a large role in a person's ability to participate in global communications. Seriously, let's look at it. iPhones are expensive. Getting any sort of cellular device that has the ability to connect to the internet and then paying the bill so that you can connect to the internet, it's all extraordinarily expensive. And if you don't have the ability to purchase that, how much stuff are you losing out on? Quite a bit. So, humans on the move. We have migrants, immigrants, refugees, and exiles, four different types of people that move. So, migrants are people who leave their homes to work for a time in another region or countries. We see this a lot of the time where people from poorer countries tend to go to more industrialized nations and send back money. Immigrants, people who leave their country with no expectation of returning. Um, these are the people who tend not to want to go back at all. So, refugees, people who migrate because of political oppression, war, it's usually with legal permission to stay in a different country. Exiles are people who are expelled by the authorities of their home countries. Financial globalization. This began in the 1870s and it has been interrupted by two world wars, of course, but has really accelerated over the last 60 years as technology has become cheaper and we've had more access to quicker ways of communicating around the world. So many corporations have set up shop in countries with low hourly wages or lax environmental regulations. We see this all the time, and I will be posting a video that I want you all to watch after this PowerPoint that talks about living wages. So there's that. They have accumulated vast amounts of capital assets. If Walmart were a nation state, it would be the world's 24th largest economy. Let that sink in for just a second. Walmart has more wealth than over half of the world's countries. Yeah. So, are there winners and losers in global integration? The simple answer is most definitely yes. So, promoters of globalization emphasize benefits of interconnectedness. Opponents emphasize negatives. An anthropological analysis of globalization must explore cultural nuances of global interconnections. So the benefits tend to be an unprecedented prosperity and economic growth, especially for the more lucrative country. A downside is poverty and a widening gap between the rich and the poor, and of course, the loss of an actual middle class. Cultural nuances of global interconnections end up causing inequality, confrontation, domination, accommodation, and resistance. So, world system theories. Capitalism has expanded on the basis of unequal exchange throughout the world, creating a global market and global division of labor and dividing the world between a dominant core and a dependent periphery. So that would be what is considered the more Western nations as the dominant core, or the industrialized nations, and those like Sub-Saharan Africa or South America as being the dependent periphery. Basically, what happens within the core nations, they develop at an alarming rate because they're able to use workers and lax regulations within these other population centers um, that give them an economic boost. So, core nations develop at the expense of the periphery nations. Role of the periphery nation is to provide labor and raw materials for the core consumption, resulting in the periphery's poverty, underdevelopment, and dependency on the core. Postcolonial studies, world system theories have been especially relevant to the scholars of postcolonialism, the cultural legacy of colonialism and imperialism. Remember, as we were saying, the core take advantage of the periphery, and colonialism is a very good example of this. You can look at any of the colonialized nations. An easy one to think of is Benin in West Africa. It was a colony of France. It is still a francophone country. However, it has been kind of torn asunder, and the people have had a hard time trying to get out from under the influence of the French, and for that, a lot of them live in poverty, absolute poverty. So, resistance on the periphery. And so, anthropologists do study the resistance by a group on the periphery, range from open rebellion to forms of so subtle that they might not be recognized by outsiders. An example of the range of open rebellion would definitely be Haiti. Hopefully I'll be able to talk about it more during the semester, but they are the only African descendants that have rebelled to the point where they were able to kick out the colonialized forces and start their own nation. And so, shows of how people interrupt and challenge global processes through the local cultural idioms and beliefs. For example, female workers in a Malaysian factory protested working conditions via spirit possession, making them violent, loud, and disruptive. So, the localization is the creation and assertion of highly, particularly often place-based identities and communities. Localization is reflected in the patterns of consumption. For example, Sphere's young Bokano men from the Dominican Republic of Congo use clothes to accumulate prestige and project self-worth to the upper class of the Congolese society. Does everyone want to be developed? Colonial governments refer to their duty to bring civilization to the uncivilized parts of the world. In 1949, U.S. President Harry Truman sought to help the underdeveloped world. International development is promoted by the United Nations, government aid agencies, lending agencies, and NGOs. Technologically advanced capitalist countries are models for ideal and social development. And that definitely has not changed. But that doesn't really answer the question, does it? So, anthropology and development. The goal of development, is it to improve material conditions while maintaining diversity? Or is it to eliminate diversity in the attempt to make everyone the same? Well, there are two anthropological approaches to development: development anthropology and anthropology of development. So, the development of anthropology is the application of anthropological knowledge and research methods to the practical aspects of shaping and implementing developmental projects, as it is branch of applied anthropology. Anthropology of development is the field of study within anthropology concerned with understanding the cultural conditions for proper development, or alternatively, the negative impacts of development projects. So, development anthropology. Development anthropology guides development projects in ways that are beneficial for local people, in addition to the plans of outside agencies. For example, Gerald Murray worked to reduce deforestation in Haiti in the 1970s and 80s. Murphy bridged the gap between the goals of the planners and those of the farmers, suggesting efficient, mutually beneficial solutions. Anthropology of development. Some anthropologists support the work of development anthropology by exploring what kinds of social conditions might help projects succeed. To others, development inevitably causes harm. It gives more control to outsiders, worsens social inequality, and perpetrates ethnocentric and paternalistic attitudes of the colonial era. So it really is a fine line on to develop of what are considered underdeveloped countries or not, and how far to push them, when to push, how to push, blah blah. So, cultural convergence theory. And Gellner, local traditions are fading as Western ideas replace them. And then you have the McDonaldization model, which is characteristics of fast food restaurants and American societies. So the McDonaldization model is efficiency, calculability, predictability, tight control over product, and the mechanism labor over human labor. So, and then you have the Coca-Cola colonization of cultural and economically powerful Western nations imposing their products and beliefs on the rest of the world. Coca-Cola has a different formula for each different country that they have a stake in. And this is also called the cultural imperialism. Cultural imperialism is the promotion of one culture over others through formal policy or less formal means, like the spread of technology and material culture. Convergence and world culture. World cultures are norms and values that extend across nation boundaries. Shared food, entertainment, and clothing do not necessarily mean that humans are culturally homogeneous. In other respects, one major limitation of the convergence theories is that they equate material goods with cultural and personal identity. Hybridization. Persistent cultural mixing that has no predetermined direction or endpoint is the definition. This emphasizes a world-based cultural mix, border crossing, and persistent cultural diversity. Some critics argue that cultural mixing is a superficial phenomenon or that it ignores political power, economic power, and inequality. Still, other anthropologists assert that there are three theories need be mutually exclusive. Convergent fits some contexts, cultural conflicts fits others, and hybridization is occurring everywhere, all simultaneously. Convergence and cultural conflict and hybridization. As some anthropologists assert that there are three theories being mutually exclusive. So, this is exactly what I just said. So, I'm going to go on. So, when reviewing the chapter, you definitely want to look at how globalization works on the scale and how anthropologists would go about looking at the cultural, economic, and political impacts of globalization on both the industrialized as well as non-industrialized nations. So after this, remember to watch the video link that I will have right below this folder, and then go on to your discussion board and quiz. Thank you very much and have a good week.